Hey, thank you for joining me for another On the Wine Road podcast. This one comes from my recent show celebrating National Rosé Day. Pink is popular. In honor of National Rosé Day, I'll be talking with 3 different winemakers. One is a winery owner who make distinctive rosé wine. You'll hear from Blair Guthrie of Napa Valley Stewart Cellars, Mike Martini from Sonoma County's Taft Street Winery, and Randall Watkins of Glen Ellen's Laurel Glen Vineyard. Dry rosé has been gaining in popularity exponentially over the past few years in the States, just like white Zinfandel did in the 70s and 80s. But now the dry version of pink wine has piqued our interest. And in Provence, France, where the wine is deeply rooted, it has seen rosé sales doubling annually and managed a 50% increase last year. Why? Well, rosé wines offer flexibility for serious and casual wine drinkers. It goes well with food and is great on its own on a hot day. Now it's made with a great number of varieties: Pinot Noir, Grenache, Zinfandel, Syrah, even Cab Franc. And wait until you hear about 2 of the rosés we'll discuss today: the Stewart Cellars Sonoma Mountain Rosé and the Laurel Glen Rosella, also from Sonoma Mountain. And Taft Street Winery's Rosé reached a one-of-a-kind accolade. It's all coming up. I'm Jeff Davis. I'll begin with Blair Guthrie of Stewart Cellars in Yountville, Napa Valley. I met him recently during their spring soiree and really enjoyed his rosé. We'll tell you how unique it is in just a moment. We met up in a Bennett Valley vineyard they source from, and I thought I'd have some fun concerning his acceptance into the Stewart family. You know, Blair, I found it interesting on the Stewart Cellars website. They talk about quests, which includes sourcing consistently lush fruit, delivering wine beyond expectation every time, and building lasting relationships with vineyard owners. But apparently the lasting relationships include winemakers too, because Michael Stewart gave you his blessing to marry his daughter.
Yeah, he did. I actually, we have a very amazing marriage, obviously, to Caroline. I remember flying to Texas I was actually living in Australia at the time. I'm a Kiwi originally, but I was working and living in Australia. And I flew over to Texas to sneak up to his bedroom one night and ask him if I could have his daughter's hand in marriage.
Wow.
Yeah.
You actually flew to ask him in person.
Yeah, and my heart I remember beating out of my chest and I could barely talk. It was pretty intimidating.
Wow.
But he luckily said yes. He said, you know, well, I don't know you very well, Blair, but I trust my daughter. So, yeah, go for it.
Well, you told me the story about how you and Caroline met, and I'm sure my listeners would like to hear it. Why don't you tell that again?
Yeah, so we met in Sebastopol at Paul Hobbs. He has a custom crush winery. So the Stewart brand was being made there, and Caroline was interning at the winery, learning how to basically make wine. And you know, her goal was to be involved in the production side of the Stewart Cellars family. Yeah. And I had come over to do an internship, and I was working there as well.
Let's touch upon the vineyards you're working with now with Stewart Cellars.
Yeah.
So you have Napa, you have Bennett Valley and Sonoma Mountain and Sonoma Coast.
Yeah, so we're a little bit everywhere. Our kind of concept is that we want to make the best wines from the best vineyards in the best regions. And so we don't want to have to shoehorn ourselves into one estate. So I go for, our Bordeaux that we make for Stewart, it's all Napa Valley. I personally think that's where the best Bordeaux are growing here. So we're up and down the Napa Valley. And then for our Burgundy grapes, we're Sonoma Mountain, Sonoma Coast, because for me, I believe those are the best areas for those to grow. And then we're going and finding, great vineyards. And also a big thing for us is signing these vineyards up for long-term contracts. We want to have a long-term relationship with these growers. You can't just go in and out of a vineyard every couple of years. It just takes too long to figure it out.
Yeah, you got to get to know it.
Exactly. How to farm it, when to pick it, how to ferment it. It takes years. In my opinion, it takes about 5 years to figure out how to make wine from a particular vineyard before you start figuring out, and then I think you're still learning about it for another 5 after that. Sure. For instance, we just signed up Andy Beckstoffer's 6 heritage vineyards in Napa Valley. So we signed a 10-year contract with that because I personally think it's going to take that long to perfect those wines coming out of those vineyards.
Sure. but a nice reputation that they have.
Yeah, that definitely helps, and he's got a great reputation and he's done a lot for Napa Valley, but the reality is he grows great fruit, and great wines come off those vineyards, and we want to make fantastic wine, yeah.
Sonoma Mountain is where you source the grapes for your most interesting rosé.
Yes.
I thought highlighting your rosé for this Rosé Day would be ideal. So tell me about the fruit that goes into that most unique blend.
Yeah, so we get it from the Richard Dinner Vineyard, and we also get our Chardonnay from Sonoma Mountain as well, which is the vineyard right below it. So our rosé is made of Pinot Noir and Pinot Gris. So a little small block of Pinot Gris. It's mainly Pinot Gris. So
what's the percentage?
It's 95% Pinot Gris. Yeah,
95% of a white grape for a rosé.
Well, Pinot Gris is an interesting grape. It actually has gray skins.
That's what gris refers
means
to.
gray. Yeah, exactly. And so if you leave it on skins for a little bit, you're going to get some pinking happening of that grape naturally. So Pinot Gris, if you just made it as a white wine, it could either be crystal clear like Sauvignon Blanc, or it can have a pink haze to it. And so that's all to do with how much skin contact you give it. And we give it a little bit. We basically put it into the press and give it a light squeeze, and then we sit it in there for a few hours before we do anything to try a little skin contact. And the reason, I love Pinot Gris, it was a grape I really loved making in Australia. It just has amazing flavor and aroma, and it also has good texture if you do some batonnage on the lees post fermentation. And it's also a grape that you can pick relatively early, and still get a fantastic wine out of it. So for a rosé, for me, it's meant to be light and fun. I didn't want to make a big rosé that had a lot of, maybe higher in alcohol and a huge amount of texture. I really wanted to keep it light and fun. For me, that's what rosé is. It's spring and summer. It's sitting out in the sun and, eating oysters and drinking rosé.
Crisp and refreshing.
Exactly, yeah, that's what it should be. And not too serious. If you really want to sit down and have a serious wine you want to think about, you can drink our Cabernets.
Right. Do you leave the Pinot Noir on the skins longer to get more color?
Yeah, so the Pinot Noir we basically ferment. I basically use it to ferment the Pinot Noir for Stewart Cellars, and I'll pull off when, partway through fermentation, I'll pull off a slug of it. And use that to blend into the rosé.
Okay.
That way, we don't leave it on there, and obviously until the end of fermentation, so that it's not too much texture and tannin and things coming out of it.
But it's a fun rosé to drink, and I suggest our listeners to pursue that, because you will never have a rosé, at least that I'm aware of, with that kind of blend.
No, it is, and that's another thing. I wanted to make it interesting, an interesting blend. Most people are doing a rosé of Pinot Noir or a rosé of Syrah. That's where most of them are coming from, and I was like, I don't want to do that. I want to think of something different, something exciting, with a bit more of a story behind it.
That's a good story. Yeah. You got a lot of good stories. Well, when we were at the Stewart Cellars Spring Soiree a few weeks ago, it was a warm day that day, boy, it sure tasted good out there.
Yeah, nice and cold. It's been on ice. We had we had our frosé there with our ice cream with the rosé.
I didn't get a chance to do that. But
it was good. It was a hit. We also had a lot of oysters there, Drake's Bay oysters.
Those went quick.
Oh yeah, they went quick. There was a lot of people sitting there with a glass of rosé and a handful of oysters.
And I did enjoy your red wines as well. They're very flavorful and nice and full and rich, like you would expect a Napa wine to be.
Exactly. When I got here, I was really, we're in California, and I want to make California wines. So our Napa Valley wines, I want to make them Napa Valley wines, and our Sonoma wines, I want to make them Sonoma wines. I do pull inspiration from places like France and Australia and Italy and things, but I'm here, I want to make wines that represent this area. So, our Napa Cabs and Merlot and things are big, full, luscious, fruit-forward wines.
Blair, you must feel like you're one of the luckiest winemakers in the world right now.
I do.
You got a wife out of the deal. You got a cool place to work and live.
I know. My buddy Nick says you hit the lottery. But to be honest, I feel like every winemaker should feel like they're lucky. To be in an industry like this, where you get to make wine and your lifestyle is basically food and wine, and
beauty. Here we are standing in a vineyard.
Exactly, we're in a vineyard. Hey, I'm not cooped up in the middle of a city somewhere. I'm not a city boy. I was a country boy. I was raised on a farm, and I couldn't see myself doing anything else, I don't think. But yeah, I feel lucky every day. Yeah, definitely.
Blair Guthrie of Stewart Cellars. He wanted to point out that their 2 tasting rooms in Yountville, side by side, are there for guests to enjoy the experience. In other words, take your time, soak in the ambiance, and you might want to take advantage of their on-site Gather Cafe as well. Visit stewartcellars.com. That's STEWART, cellars.com. Now let's turn to a former garagiste, a man who made wine in a garage back in the 70s, and he's a self-made man, too. Mike Martini has been the mayor of Santa Rosa, a councilman, even the president of the Sonoma County Harvest Fair Board. He's hilarious, too. I invited Mike of Taft Street Winery because his 2016 Rosé won the Best of the Best award at this year's North Coast Wine Challenge, beating out over 1,000 other wines that entered. We sat outside their tasting room just before they were featuring some live music, and I offered Mike a big congratulations.
Well, thank you very much. It's always nice to have somebody say you're doing a good thing in life.
You and I talked on the phone about how rare it is for a rosé wine to win a competition. Neither one of us recall that ever happening before.
Well, I think in the California market that's exactly the case because rosés are not necessarily a mainstream wine as they are in a lot of other places. And what we've seen, certainly in Northern California, and I think you're seeing it throughout most wine-growing regions, is people look for doing something different. They look to some of the old school heritage kinds of wines, and certainly Rosé fits that bill. In America, it was mostly white Zinfandel, finished a little sweet, a little bit of spritz. It really isn't a true Rosé. What we did in the 2016 Russian River Valley Pinot Noir is a true Rosé. The grapes were harvested to make Rosé. It's not an afterthought. We're not alone in doing that. So, yes, it's a surprise to see the Rosé win Best of the Best, but not really a surprise because rosés are truly incredible wines, and I think they merit that kind of award.
I should also point out that not only did you win the Best of Class for the Rosé category, you also won the Best of Class for Sonoma County. So 2 big accolades for you. And the one problem with the popularity, but also just the nature of that wine, is that it runs out early, so our listeners can't even come over here and try it, the 2016 anyway.
And it is unfortunate. But, Taft Street as a producer, we are a small producer. And as a small producer, things are available for a small bit of time. And I'm okay with that. And I think the consumer is too. They like going out and finding new things. The downside is it's not always there. This is not a wine that will be there for a long time. We bottled a total of 268 cases. When we received the award, we had 170 left. And it took about a month to sell the rest of that out.
Tell me about the Pinot Noir vineyard from which these grapes were sourced.
I think that's part of the story as well. And with most small wineries, you have wonderful stories. That's how small wineries exist. Everybody has to have a story. In this particular case, the grapes for the Pinot Noir came from the Bello Sonoma vineyard. Southern end of the Russian River Valley. If you're not familiar with that name, Artibletto is also known as the Pasta King in Sonoma County. The man is 82 years old, and I think he's given 82 years of his life to the community. He's an incredible giving man. He's a very good friend, and he grows some incredible fruit. So it was kind of a double honor. Not only did the wine receive the award, but the wine comes from the vineyard. So Art celebrates with us in receiving this award.
Well, you guys started with simple beginnings in an Oakland garage back in 1979, and you still cling to that endearing term, the garagiste, which was adopted by the rogue winemakers in Bordeaux. And your winemaking philosophy mirrors that, those who chose to produce small lots of limited production wines.
Yeah, and I actually will tell you that the philosophy that we have is fun. We started, as you described, in a garage in the Rockridge district in Oakland, just on the border of Berkeley. There was a hot tub involved. The statute of limitations has expired on all activities that took place in the garage at that time. But it was an incredible time, an absolutely incredible time. Late 70s, creative people doing creative things. We loved the sense of social. We loved the sense of getting together and having conversation. John made wine, I made beer, Mike did the cooking. Any given night we would have 10, sometimes we would have 50 people there. And the best wine you will ever drink is wine that is free and you're drinking it with good friends and having good conversation. We've never lost any of that. Our whole reason to be is to have fun. We want to make sure that the experience is not Actually, let's be positive. We want the experience to be enjoyable. We want the experience not to be intimidating. We want the experience to be shared, and we want the experience to be social. And therein lies, I think, the real strength of wine.
I was going to put in my questions, I was going to ask you about whether this is still fun for you after all these years. And you answered that when we got here. Before I even started interviewing you, you were talking about how much fun you're still having.
And it is fun. And I have to tell one other little story on this thing. I have one son, and when he was about 12 years old, I put him on the bottling line. And after 2 days on the bottling line, he came to me and he said, this sucks. I hate this job. How can you do this? This is terrible. And he was going to be a doctor, and he was going to have his Learjet by the time he was 27. Fast forward, he finished Davis, got a degree in advanced biology, was going to take the MCATs, go to med school, ended up getting hired by a bank. The bank liked him, put him through an MBA program. And then we had that downturn in the economy in late 2008, 9, 10. He came to me because there's two jobs that he and his friend, now he's living in San Francisco, wanted. And they either wanted to be the head of a Google marketing or Google-like, or they wanted to work for a winery. And in 2011, my son joined me here in the winery, and there is nothing that I am more proud of in the sense that I get to continue the fun that I've been having for 35 years and be able to pass it on to the son. That continuity is something that is echoed throughout Sonoma County agriculture, the multi-generational families that are involved. And of all the things that I've done, and I've been the mayor of the city of Santa Rosa, I've served on the city council, I've done a lot of other things. Having my son join me in a company that I helped start is truly incredible. And yes, we are still having fun in it. We don't have that Learjet, and that's okay. But I'm sitting here on a beautiful day in the Russian River Valley, sipping on a glass of wine and talking about what I love to do. I can't imagine doing anything else.
Continued success to you and your son Jake in the future.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for doing this. I mean, people ask me all the time, there are more than 500 wineries in Sonoma County. How can that be? Well, the reason it can be is because the small wineries have stories, and you provide us an opportunity to tell the Taft Street story. And that story, while it's not repeated verbatim, there is a story for every one of these wineries. And the good news is the consumer's looking for those stories. So the job that you're doing in letting people tell their story, tell the story of the garage in Oakland, is an important piece that allows us to continue to do what we love. So thank you for that.
Mike, the pleasure's all mine.
That was very kind of him to say. Find out more about their wine and fun outdoor concerts at taftstreetwinery.com. That's TAFT streetwinery.com. The story of another very unusual rosé is coming up next on The Wine Road. We are now back. Thank you for sticking around for today's podcast. The tales of rosé on this National Rosé Day now take me high atop Sonoma Mountain and to the historic Laurel Glen Vineyards. They're known for their Cabernets, the Estate, Counterpoint, and now their new Lot series, but their ancient vines are drawing great attention as the grapes used within their Rosella Rosé. I met winemaker Randall Watkins at their vineyards on Thursday morning. That was the low-cloud, misty day, and their gnarly old vines are a sight to see.
That's right. These ancient vines next to us were planted in the 1880s, we believe by German immigrants to the town of Sonoma and Glen Ellen. And they are mixed blacks, so each vine is different. And some, I don't even know what they actually are. And I'm really good with ampelography, where you can tell what the vine is by looking at the leaves, the morphology, and also you can sometimes tell by the clusters later after clusters have actually set. But I'm really good at doing that with the common varieties, and these ones, some of them I've never even seen before. So it's a very interesting ancient vineyard that we have to use for our Laurel Glen Rosé.
Just you're tasting history there, aren't you? That's what's so neat about it.
It is. The old vines, they come into their own self-balance. So we do have not a very large crop, of course, from these vines, and the flavor that we're getting is really amazing, and a mixture of different fruits that we're getting from the different varieties that we harvest all at the same time too.
Aside from that ancient vine, you have a couple of older, or is it three other like 50-year-old Cabernet vines as well you're blending in with it.
That's right. So the Rosé is from the mixed blacks, and then it has some Cabernet, old vine Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot in it as well.
Okay. And those vines they look old as well.
They look
a little gnarly and twisted.
They are. They have big, thick trunks, and really interesting looking, to tell you the truth.
So as a winemaker, you're like an artist who's been given something different, like instead of a paintbrush, you're using an old crayon or something like that, or instead of a canvas, you're handed a wood palette to create your art with. So it's a completely different type of set of implements to work with.
It is. I like to have a rosé. I've made them in many different ways, and most people these days are making rosé as a saignée, where you're bleeding from the red grape tank at a certain amount of hours on the skins in order to make a saignée rosé, and then make a more concentrated red wine from the tank that retains the skins. But we're doing it more like a white wine, because I want to pick the grapes when I find that they are ready, not when I would normally pick a red wine, but a little bit earlier, when the grapes have higher acidity, more delicate fruit character, rather than the really riper character I would make with a red wine. And so when the grapes come to the winery, I actually press off rather than crushing and going to tank to make a red wine. I'm pressing off just like I would with a white wine, not fermented with the skins and the seeds, right, but even whole cluster pressed and very little skin contact time, which gives us this nice, really light red rosé color.
Well, it's a beautiful salmon color. I was wondering even how you get that much color if you're pressing it off right away.
Well, I would be worried with Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot to spend too much time on the skins. It would get dark very quickly. Yeah. And so in order to make the wine more delicate, it has more body than a wine that would be made from white grapes typically. You can get a little bit of structure to it, but it's also fresh and really lively energy in this wine.
Right. Like you said, it does have some rich flavor to it, and I found it to be a little sweet, and not like a residual sugar, but from a fruit sweetness. How does it obtain that?
Well, that's a good question. It's certainly from the mix of varieties. I think we're getting that fruit. I'm getting a lot of strawberry, watermelon, and even some pink grapefruit in the wine. Mm. And the other thing I do is all stainless steel. So it's stainless steel fermented at a very cool temperature, and that retains the freshness and the aromatics in the wine by not letting the fermentation really roil around and blow off the aromas. There's no need for extraction, so I want to keep it cool and fresh. Yeah.
You think maybe those old vines, there's something in there that just could be imparting that slightly sweet flavor? Maybe an old muscat or something?
It is possible, you know. I recognize a couple of the vines. In fact, there's some Grenache. There's actually some Alicante Bouschet, which I would also want to limit the skin contact time with, so it wouldn't get too dark.
Which is one of the few grapes that actually has red juice.
Right. So red flesh, in addition to the red skins. Most Vitis vinifera wine grapes would be clear fleshed, whether they're red or white. And this one is a lot more of like the Teinturiers.
And when you talk about flesh, you're not talking about the skin like our flesh. You're talking about the inside pulp.
That's right. Yeah. So the pulp is red with the Teinturiers.
Well, the Rosella does have a unique characteristic to it, and compared to a lot of other rosés, so I think our listeners should reach out for a bottle and try it and see what they think about it.
I think they should too.
How are you doing on product? You got some Rosella left? Is it running out?
Well, we've just released the 2016, so we're doing well on this one, but it does sell out quickly. Sure. And so each year I try to make a little bit more to extend it. And this year we've made a little bit of Sauvignon Blanc in case the rosé runs out too early again.
Which I was going to get to next, a new varietal for you. Tell us about the Sauvignon Blanc. That also comes from an old vineyard, doesn't it?
Yes, Laurel Glen's Sauvignon Blanc is from Hopkins River Ranch in Russian River, and it's very possibly the oldest Sauvignon Blanc in Sonoma County. It's over 40 years old, so not as old as our Rosé, certainly, but Sauvignon Blanc tends to, if it does get older, often people replant. So this one has survived and come into its own self-balance, where old vines aren't overcropped. So our Sauvignon Blanc just has so much flavor and concentration from it. I love that this is an old vines Sauvignon Blanc that we have.
And you call it blank slate, but you spell it like Blanc. Do you pronounce it blank slate or blanc slate?
I say blanc slate, but I have heard a lot of consumers come up and say, I'll try the blank slate.
Well, it makes sense. We're familiar with that term.
Yes. Well,
and that's intentional, I imagine.
It was intentional. We had not trouble, but so many ideas about names to call our white wine that we made a little bit of fun of ourselves on the label, crossing out a bunch of the different ideas and then coming up with the blanc slate at the end.
I saw a photo of it, but I didn't realize that's what that was, all the other names. And it must be challenging these days with so many wines out there to come up with a name that hasn't been used yet.
It is. I don't think blanc slate was used, though.
I don't think so, yeah.
Randall Watkins of Laurel Glen Vineyard. We didn't get a chance to talk about their Cabernet Sauvignon, but they are a fantastic representation of mountain Cabernets. Visit laurelglenvineyard.com, LaurelGlen vineyard.com, and be sure to check out their new Lot series. I hope you enjoyed our tip of the hat, or bottle as it may be, on National Rosé Day. If you're listening to this on iTunes or another podcast provider, you can learn more about my show at onthewineroad.com and on Facebook as well. I'm on Instagram under the name JD Wine Road and on Twitter at JD Wine Road. I'm Jeff Davis.